Los Angeles, April 1st, 2025. Val Kilmer, the actor whose shape-shifting performances defined films from Top Gun to The Doors, died at the age of 65. The cause was pneumonia, a complication of his long struggle with throat cancer, according to his daughter Mercedes. Kilmer's passing brings to a close a tumultuous career that soared to Hollywood's heights even as it was often shadowed by off-screen controversy. Val was a daring leading man with a chameleon-like intensity, and he became as famous for his on-set clashes and capricious reputation as for his uncanny portrayals of icons like Jim Morrison and Doc Holliday. His feuds with directors and crew became Hollywood lore, one of many episodes that made him notorious as a difficult star. So what was the dark truth behind Hollywood's original Iceman? Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Val Edward Kilmer was born on December 31, 1959 in Los Angeles, California. He was the second of 3 sons in a family of both means and faith. His mother Gladys was of Swedish descent, and his father Eugene amassed a serious fortune supplying aerospace equipment, a fortune he later lost when a real estate venture went bankrupt in the early 1990s. The Kilmers raised their children in the Christian Science Church, a faith that practices spiritual healing, and he would need plenty of this during his early life. Young Val's childhood was one of both privilege and pain. When he was 9, his parents divorced, an event he later described as the biggest thing I'd been through, making him feel like the odd kid out among peers. He and his brothers went to live with their father after the split, but Val's relationship with Eugene was rough for many years. Then a heavy tragedy hit the family in Val's teenage years. In 1977, his younger brother Wesley, whom Val adored, suffered an epileptic seizure and drowned in the family swimming pool at age 15. The loss totally devastated Val. My little brother was just an amazing artist, a genius, he reflected. Wesley had dreamed of becoming a filmmaker, and Val believed the boy could have been, as he put it, the next George Lucas or Steven Spielberg if fate had been kinder. Astonishingly, on the very day of Wesley's funeral, 17-year-old Val boarded a plane to New York City to attend the Juilliard School. He had been accepted into Juilliard's drama division, at the time the youngest student ever admitted, and overwhelmed with grief, he managed to throw himself into the world of acting without even a day to process the burial of his kid brother. In later years, Kilmer would check into hotels under his late brother's name, which was his way of keeping Wesley's memory close. At Juilliard, Kilmer's intensity and precocious talent stood out. He immersed himself in classical training and even co-wrote an original play during his studies. In 1981, while still a student, he co-created and starred in How It All Began, an experimental play about a German terrorist which famed producer Joseph Papp picked up for a run at the Public Theater in New York. By 1983, at age 23, Kilmer made his Broadway debut in The Slab Boys, a coming-of-age drama in which he played a snobbish art student opposite 2 other up-and-coming actors, Sean Penn and Kevin Bacon. The production ran only briefly, just 48 performances, but Kilmer won some strong notices. The New York Times critic Frank Rich commended the, quote, fine, firm shading of his performance. That praise, modest as it was, helped open Hollywood's doors. Hollywood's doors weren't the only ones opening for Val. At 23, he was invited to Cher's birthday party in 1982. The 36-year-old singer was at the peak of her glamorousness at the time, but somehow Val managed to capture her attention on the night, and they ended up dating. For all his handsomeness, Val's mullet hairdo and tuxedo combination does seem a little incongruous next to Cher's sublime style and beauty. But this was a relationship that ran much deeper than the surface. At least for Cher. He was like nobody I'd ever known, she said, describing herself as madly in love. However, for Val, the feelings weren't quite mutual, and he broke it off with her in 1984, although they did remain friends for the rest of his life. Val's seriousness about acting was evident from the start. Even before fame, he showed an almost uncompromising devotion to authenticity. As an adolescent, he reportedly walked off the set of a hamburger commercial, feeling he was unable to muster fake enthusiasm for the subpar product. And at Juilliard, he turned down tantalizingly lucrative opportunities if they conflicted with his stage commitments. In one famous instance, he passed on a chance to appear in Francis Ford Coppola's The Outsiders, so that he could remain with the small Shakespeare production he'd signed on to, a decision that showed just where his priorities lay. By the mid-1980s, with his theater pedigree and leading man looks, he seemed destined for stardom, if he could learn to loosen up and embrace it. Val's break in Hollywood came, in the end, in pretty unlikely circumstances. After the Slab Boys closed, the young actor's calendar was suddenly free, and Zucker Abraham Zucker, the trio behind the hit spoof Airplane, invited him to audition for a new parody film. The result was 1984's Top Secret, a very silly rapid-fire send-up of Cold War spy movies, in which Val played a square-jawed American rock and roll singer caught up in absurd espionage antics. It was, to say the least, an unconventional debut for a Juilliard-trained actor, but Kilmer dove in with deadpan commitment. He even did all of his own singing for the film's Elvis-style musical numbers. His co-directors encouraged him to have fun with the farce, but Kilmer approached even the goofiest gag with a straight face. The contrast between the zany material and Kilmer's earnest intensity only made his performance funnier. Audiences saw that he had a flair for comedy under that seriousness, an underutilized facet of his talent that would resurface years later in films like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. His next role kept him in a comic vein when he played a brilliant but carefree science student in the nerdy caper Real Genius in 1985. With his bleach blonde hair, irreverent one-liners, and slipper-wearing swagger, Val's character in Real Genius became a sort of cult favorite, a charismatic oddball who drew something from the actor's own offbeat persona. But it was his next part as a swaggering naval aviator with an ice-cold stare that rocketed Val Kilmer to mainstream immortality. In 1986, Kilmer co-starred in Tony Scott's high-octane action film Top Gun, playing Tom Iceman Kazansky, the cocky rival to Tom Cruise's hotshot pilot, Maverick. With his chiseled features and steely delivery, Kilmer's Iceman was the cool antagonist audiences loved to hate. Top Gun became the year's biggest blockbuster, and it cemented Val as a new Hollywood heartthrob, on a par even with his mighty co-star in the fan mail stakes. In fact, the actor himself hadn't initially wanted the role at all. "I didn't care about the film. The story didn't interest me," he later admitted, revealing that he only auditioned for Top Gun under pressure from his agent. He even tried to sabotage the audition by reading his lines with deliberate indifference, to no avail. The filmmakers saw the Iceman in Kilmer and cast him anyway, and this was a decision totally vindicated by the film's staggering success. Val would eventually make peace with Top Gun's legacy. Decades later, he lobbied to reprise Iceman in the 2022 sequel, Top Gun Maverick, going so far as to write his own ideas for the character's return. The sequel's producers and crews agreed to bring him back, and this resulted in a poignant reunion on screen. Off-screen, the newly famous Val showed quite a lot of ambivalence toward his sudden jet-fueled stardom. He could be openly critical of the projects he took on. In interviews, he lampooned Top Gun as silly and a horrible celebration of redneckness, which was his way of shrugging off the testosterone-soaked glorification that the 1980s audiences had gone wild for. He would turn down other high-profile opportunities throughout the 80s, including Blue Velvet, Dirty Dancing, and an unrealized project by Robert Altman. It wasn't that Kilmer lacked ambition. He was simply choosy, even capricious, about the kind of actor he wanted to be. One of those roles came in Willow, the 1988 fantasy adventure produced by George Lucas that became iconic to a generation of millennials. In Willow, Val played Mad Mardigan, a roguish swordsman, and he brought some Douglas Fairbanks-style swashbuckling charm and comic timing to the film. Willow also introduced him to English actress Joanne Whalley, who was his on-screen love interest. Life quickly imitated art. The two actors fell in love during the shoot in Wales. After Cher, Val had not met anyone he was serious about. He'd had flings with women like Carly Simon and diner star Ellen Barkin. But it was Joanne who caught Val's eye for real. They married in early 1988, just months after meeting, and Wally became Joanne Wally Kilmer. For a time, the Kilmers were a Hollywood golden couple. They had 2 children together, a daughter, Mercedes, born in 1991, and a son, Jack, born in 1995. By the end of the 1980s, Val Kilmer had firmly established himself as a versatile young actor on the rise. He'd proven he could handle satire, Top Secret, modern comedy, Real Genius, high drama, Top Gun, and fantasy, Willow. The 1990s would soon offer Kilmer the chance to step into the shoes of some of America's most legendary figures. But they would also test the limits of his mercurial temperament, as his fame and frustration would collide with fiery results. Before I get into the explosive rise of Val in the 90s, I'd like to make a quick aside to introduce you to the 3 brand new t-shirt designs we have over on the Hollywood Mystery Store at the moment. Kay Francis, John Waters, and a special shirt featuring Nick and Nora, or William Powell and Myrna Loy, if you prefer, and not forgetting their famous pup, Asta. Buying a shirt is a huge help to the channel and will no doubt impress your movie-loving friends. It makes a perfect gift too, so be sure to stop by the store and check out the merch, all of which is exclusively designed in-house here at Hollywood Mysteries, and not available anywhere else. In 1991, Val delivered what many consider his defining performance when he disappeared into the role of rock icon Jim Morrison in Oliver Stone's film, The Doors. It was a casting that initially seemed far-fetched. The babyface surfer rock and roller from Top Secret as a dark, Dionysian lizard king of 1960s rock. But Val approached Morrison with almost frightening dedication. To convince Stone he was right for the part, Kilmer made an 8-minute audition tape of himself performing Doors songs. He spent months prior to filming in obsessive preparation. He drowned himself in Morrison's poetry and music, learning to mimic the singer's slithery moves and baritone voice. By the time cameras rolled, Val had learned 50 of the Doors songs, and he wound up singing many of the film's concert scenes himself, and his vocals were virtually indistinguishable from Morrison's. The transformation was so complete that Doors guitarist Robbie Krieger and producer Paul Rothchild said watching him was like seeing Jim Morrison alive again. Critics, too, were mesmerized. Roger Ebert marveled that in The Doors there is never, not even for a moment, the sensation that Kilmer is not singing everything we hear, adding that the performance revealed a remarkable talent that had hitherto been overlooked. Val seemed to channel Morrison's wild charisma and self-destructive demons in equal measure. I didn't get seduced into his style of living, Kilmer reflected, but I had to be as disciplined as he was in these escapades. He was a very disciplined drinker, as much as he was a disciplined artist. The result on screen was electric, a performance by an actor at the peak of his powers fully committed to the art. Many observers at the time felt Val was snubbed when he did not receive an Academy Award nomination for the role. Nonetheless, The Doors cemented his reputation as one of Hollywood's most serious young actors, a man capable of uncanny depth and mimicry. Val followed this artistic breakthrough by inhabiting another American legend, this time in Spurs and a Stetson. In the 1993 Western Tombstone, he portrayed Doc Holliday, the tubercular, whiskey-soaked gunslinger and gambler who rides alongside Wyatt Earp. Surrounded by a macho ensemble cast, Kurt Russell, Sam Elliott, and Bill Paxton among them, Kilmer stole the film with a scene-stealing turn that was by turns humorous, haunting, and deadly. With a genteel southern drawl and a perpetual sheen of sweat, his Doc Holliday was both deadly and droll, a foppish rogue who could quote Latin 1 minute and pull a trigger the next. Lines like "I'm your huckleberry," Val's now much memed taunt from the film, became fan favorites. Many critics and fans still call Val's Holliday the definitive screen portrayal of the gunslinger. If The Doors and Tombstone showed Kilmer's range from rock god to cowboy, the mid-90s also saw him step into perhaps the biggest boots of all, the Bat Boots. In 1995, Kilmer was cast as Bruce Wayne/Batman in Batman Forever, taking over the cape and cowl from Michael Keaton and director Joel Schumacher's neon-soaked installment of the franchise. It was the kind of role that could anoint an actor as an A-list superstar, and Batman Forever was a box office hit, one of the top-grossing films of 1995, but the experience proved bitter for Kilmer. While he brought a brooding intensity to Bruce Wayne and looked the part of the chiseled comic book hero, behind the scenes he fought with Schumacher. The director later described Val as childish and impossible on set, calling him the most psychologically disturbed human being I have ever worked with. Co-star Tommy Lee Jones also reportedly had no love for Val or Jim Carrey. Jones famously said to Carrey, "I hate you. I really don't like you. I cannot sanction your buffoonery." Schumacher, meanwhile, said that Carrey was a gentleman and that Jones and Kilmer were the source of the trouble. "I'm tired of defending overpaid, overprivileged actors. I pray I don't work with them again," the director said. Val, for his part, downplayed the bitter conflicts but did not hide his disappointment in the Batman experience. The cumbersome rubber suit and the ensuing controversy about the codpiece and fake nipples added to it, as well as the toyetic motives of Batman Forever, frustrated an actor used to meteor roles. He declined to return for a sequel, effectively walking away from the Batcave after one outing. Instead, he pivoted to a project he found far more interesting, joining an ensemble cast in a Los Angeles crime saga that would become a modern classic. That film was Michael Mann's Heat. Val starred alongside acting heavyweights Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, holding his own as Chris Shaherless, a skilled thief struggling with a gambling addiction. With his blonde ponytail and intense gaze, Val brought a certain restless energy to the part and was a vital piece of Heat's symphony of crime and regret. Director Michael Mann later praised Val's work on Heat, saying, "He always marveled at the range, the brilliant variability within the powerful current of Val's possessing and expressing character." Heat became one of the defining crime films of the decade, and though Pacino and De Niro got most of the attention, many noted that Kilmer's performance, particularly in a quietly wrenching scene where his character wordlessly leaves his wife, showcased the actor's ability to convey volumes without a word. Yet even as Val reached new career highs in the mid-90s, his reputation for difficult behavior followed close behind. In Hollywood circles, he had acquired a label as a brilliant but temperamental star, mercurial as some politely put it, or simply impossible as others insisted. Stories about Val's on-set conduct became the stuff of industry gossip and later, public headlines. In 1996, this reputation was emblazoned in scandal during the making of The Island of Dr. Moreau, a film that would live in infamy for its behind-the-scenes chaos. Val had a supporting role opposite the equally eccentric Marlon Brando in this adaptation of the H.G. Wells tale. The production, shot in the jungles of Australia and later in the South Pacific, descended into disaster by all accounts. The first director, Richard Stanley, was fired a few days into filming, and veteran John Frankenheimer was brought in to salvage the movie. Nothing, however, could salvage the relationships on set. Val was accused of belligerent behavior, at one point allegedly burning a cameraman with a lit cigarette in a fit of pique. And Frankenheimer fumed openly about his star. "I don't like Val Kilmer. I don't like his work ethic, and I don't want to be associated with him ever again," the director seethed. Frankenheimer would later go even further, saying that even if he made a movie about Val Kilmer, he, quote, "wouldn't have that prick in it." Even Brando, no saint himself on sets, reportedly said that Val had confused his talent with the size of his paycheck. The film, once released, was a critical and financial flop, and it became pretty much emblematic of Kilmer's self-defeating tendencies. Val's contentious streak did not begin or end with Dr. Moreau. Earlier, he had butted heads with director Michael Apted on the 1992 thriller Thunderheart. There were rumors that on the set of 1997's The Saint, a spy thriller where Val played a master of disguise, he insisted no one make eye contact with him, much to the irritation of cast and crew. In one incident from 1993 during the filming of The Real McCoy, Val reportedly fired a prop gun in anger when a director didn't give him what he wanted in a scene. The media began to paint him as a prime example of Hollywood prima donna behavior. Val, for his part, defended his intensity as passion for the work itself. "If I'm demanding, which I don't think I am, it's for the good of the picture," he told The Telegraph in one interview. He also later acknowledged, "I was too serious," he admitted of his peak career days, noting that he'd get upset when things like Oscars and recognition failed to come my way. In other words, he understood, albeit years later, that his passion could curdle into frustration and alienate others. By the late 90s, a series of underwhelming projects and personal setbacks cooled Kilmer's red-hot streak. After The Island of Dr. Moreau and The Saint both earned tepid responses, Kilmer's bankability took a hit. He continued to work steadily, but the projects were a mixed bag. He voiced Moses and even God in one sequence, and the animated hit The Prince of Egypt. He took a rare romantic lead in At First Sight, playing a blind man who regains his vision, but again the film was released to mixed reviews. He dipped into noir with 2000's Red Planet, a sci-fi thriller that flopped, and The Salton Sea a couple of years later, a gritty indie in which he earned praise as a tormented drug addict seeking vengeance. But the A-list offers were becoming scarcer. Hollywood's love affair with Kilmer was complicated. He was recognized as immensely talented, yet a risk to handle. As his career hit turbulence, Val's personal life was also undergoing profound change. In 1996, while he was off in the Caribbean filming the ill-fated Dr. Moreau, his marriage to Joanne Whalley fell apart in shocking fashion. According to Val, he learned of Whalley's intent to divorce him not from a phone call or letter, but from a news broadcast. Sitting in his hotel room, he saw a CNN report announcing that his wife had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, which was another way of saying she was exhausted by the constant rumors, true or not, of Val's extramarital affairs. "It's a really weird thing, modern divorce," he later mused. "I found out I was getting divorced on television. That was kind of weird." The sudden end of the 8-year marriage caught him off guard, but Val strove to ensure that the split would not hurt their young children as his own parents' breakup had hurt him. Despite the awkward public nature of the split, Kilmer and Whalley managed to co-parent amicably. Both Mercedes and Jack Kilmer remained close to their father, who often spoke proudly of them. Decades later, those children would even work with him. Mercedes had a small acting role alongside him in the 2020 crime film Pay Dirt, and Jack would narrate the 2021 Amazon documentary, Val, about Kilmer's life. In the years following his divorce and mid-90s career peak, Val kept a somewhat lower profile in the tabloids, but stayed relentlessly productive as an actor. He alternated between big-budget fare and smaller passion projects, almost as if testing what kind of actor he truly wanted to be. In 2003, he earned plaudits for his uncanny performance as porn star John Holmes in Wonderland, where he latched on to the faded glamour and desperation of the fallen adult film icon during the time of the notorious Wonderland murders. The same year, he made amends for past bad behavior to take a role in Ron Howard's western, The Missing. Having clashed with Howard 2 decades earlier on Willow, Val wrote the director a letter apologizing and asking to be included in The Missing. Howard welcomed him, and Val contributed a small but memorable part in the film. This gesture of contrition hinted at a maturing Kilmer, an actor trying to reckon with his own reputation. He also showed a newfound willingness to parody himself and embrace a little humor. In the 2005 noir comedy Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, directed by Shane Black, Val delivered what many called his funniest, most self-aware performance. He played Gay Perry, a dry-witted private detective mentoring a hapless thief played by Robert Downey Jr. in an absurd murder mystery. The role allowed Val to fire off some of the film's most scathing one-liners, and he did so with panache. Notably, it was Kilmer's own idea to make the character openly gay, an extra dash of subversive flavor he thought the film needed. "We gotta juice it up a little. I think I should be gay. I think I should kiss Robert Downey in the middle of the film," Kilmer pitched to Black. And he even joked, "Maybe this wasn't my first gay role. Maybe that was Top Gun." The film wasn't a huge box office hit, but Kiss Kiss Bang Bang became a cult favorite and reminded critics that Val's comedic chops, glimpsed back in Top Secret and Real Genius, were as sharp as ever. Many saw it as a comeback of sorts, or at least a welcome return to form. His love life was also beginning to smooth itself out. After the split from Joanne, he had dated Cindy Crawford, Angelina Jolie, and producer J.C. Gossett. However, in 2002, he fell in love in a way that would never leave him when he met Daryl Hannah on the set of the spectacularly underwhelming heist film, Hard Cash. They were spotted together looking smitten at the Wonderland premiere the following year, but the relationship wasn't to last. Daryl left Val and went on to marry Neil Young. Val was utterly heartbroken, claiming he cried every day for 6 months after they broke up. "Lord knows I've suffered heartache, but Daryl was by far the most painful of all," he said. After Hannah, he never dated again, and in 2020 he wrote in his book that he was still in love with Hannah. Val continued to pop up in eclectic projects throughout the 2000s. He did a cameo in the absurdist skit comedy Matt Gruber as a villain with the gleefully crude name Dieter von Kunth. One of his co-stars was Maya Rudolph, and if you want to hear more about her famous mother, Minnie Riperton, then make sure to check out the episode on her that we have over on the sister channel Rock and Roll Mysteries. I'll put a link in the description. He teamed again with Oliver Stone and Alexander, playing the one-eyed Macedonian King Philip II, and he also appeared in Tony Scott's Deja Vu alongside Denzel Washington, and then dipped into voice work by taking on the iconic role of Kit, the talking car, in a short-lived Knight Rider TV reboot in 2008. Not all these projects were particularly interesting or even passably watchable, and a number went direct to video, but taken together they showed Val's persistence. He was determined to keep working, churning out performances in genres ranging from horror like 2009's The Thaw to psychological thriller as in 2010's The Traveler. By the early 2010s, he had accumulated a vast and varied filmography, if not the consistent critical acclaim or superstar status that his early career promised. Meanwhile, Val also returned periodically to his first love, the stage. He played Moses in a grandiose live musical of the Ten Commandments in Los Angeles in 2004. In 2005, he went to London's West End to star in The Postman Always Rings Twice on stage. And in perhaps his most personal theatrical endeavor, he wrote, directed, and starred in a one-man show called Citizen Twain, and intriguingly engaged in an imagined dialogue with Christian Science founder Mary Baker Eddy. The Twain Project was a labor of love that Val toured in various forms, pouring his literary and spiritual interests into the performance. However, it was during the development of Citizen Twain that Kilmer began experiencing throat issues, a foreshadowing of the serious health battle to come. Through all of this period, Kilmer largely stayed out of serious scandal, but in the late 2010s, a historical allegation from decades earlier resurfaced to bring him unwanted negative press. In 2017, amid the wave of Me Too revelations, actress Caitlin O'Heaney came forward with a claim that Kilmer had physically assaulted her during an audition for The Doors back in 1989. O'Heaney alleged that in a heated audition scene, Kilmer became excessively rough, grabbing her, shaking her, and even slapping her, while director Oliver Stone looked on and, she said, laughed. The casting director on the film disputed her account, acknowledging that Kilmer pinned O'Heaney to the walls as part of the scripted scene, but denying that any outright strike to the face occurred. O'Heaney eventually reached a settlement of about $24,000 related to the incident, though she claimed the net she received was far less after legal costs. Val himself did not publicly comment in detail on the accusation at the time, and the story faded without further corroboration. Still, for those who recalled his volatile 1990s reputation, it was a jarring reminder of the thin line between method acting and misconduct. As the 2010s progressed, Kilmer's career quieted somewhat, but a far more profound challenge emerged, a fight for his health and even his life. In 2015, Kilmer was diagnosed with throat cancer. He had spent the night at Cher's home and woke up feeling very unwell. "One night I suddenly awoke vomiting blood that covered the bed like a scene out of The Godfather," he explained. "I prayed immediately, then called 911, then alerted my hostess. Cher stepped in and stepped up, he said. Once Cher works her way inside your head and heart, she never leaves, Kilmer wrote with affection, adding that her steadfast love and loyalty never die. True to his spiritual upbringing, he was initially in deep denial. A lifelong Christian Scientist, Kilmer was reluctant to acknowledge the illness and reportedly tried to rely on prayer and spiritual healing instead of medical treatment. For months, rumors swirled around about his health. He appeared in public with a scarf around his neck, thinner and frailer than before, but insisted he was fine. Finally, Val confirmed that he had undergone treatment for throat cancer, conceding that his children's concerns had convinced him to seek conventional care. The care was aggressive and life-saving, but it came at a steep cost. Val underwent chemotherapy and radiation, and multiple surgeries including a tracheostomy which left him with a permanent breathing stoma in his throat. By 2016, the cancer was in remission. He would later say he had been healed of cancer since that year, but the treatments ravaged his vocal cords. The once resonant voice, capable of both a rock star's howl and a Shakespearean oration, was reduced to a rasping, airy whisper. Val had to eat through a feeding tube for a period and could only speak with the help of an electric voice box pressed to his throat, or by covering his stoma to force out sound. I can't speak without plugging this hole in my throat, he explained in his documentary, demonstrating how breathing or speaking became an either-or choice. The struggle was evident to anyone who saw him. For an actor whose career, whose identity, was built on voice and physicality, this could have been a devastating loss, and undoubtedly it was difficult. Val stepped away from acting while recovering, but he found solace and resilience in creativity. When one thing is taken, though, another is given, he wrote to fans on social media during this time. With little voice, my creative juices were boiling over. I started creating again. Painting, writing, anything I could. I felt the art healing me. Val turned to painting as a form of therapy and expression, and he produced visual art that he occasionally exhibited or sold. Even as Kilmer lost his natural voice, technology offered an unusual lifeline. In 2021, a British AI company, Sonatic, used old recordings of Kilmer's voice to create a voice model that could speak in his tone. With this virtual voice, Kilmer could once again be heard reciting his words. The ability to communicate is the core of our existence. The chance to tell my story in a voice that feels authentic and familiar is an incredibly special gift, he said in a statement. The AI-assisted voice was used in his documentary Val and even gave him the ability to participate in film projects again. In his final years, a softer Val Kilmer emerged publicly, a man who had been humbled by illness and age, and who seemed eager to show more vulnerability than the movie idol of old. Mercedes and Jack Kilmer, now grown up, spoke eloquently about preserving their father's legacy and perspective in the documentary Val, which wove together Kilmer's personal camcorder footage from sets and home movies. The film, released in 2021 to critical acclaim, presented a portrait of Kilmer that surprised some. Funny, philosophical, artistic, and yes, still a bit enigmatic. I've lived a magical life, Val rasped through his voice box in one of the closing scenes of the doc. I've captured quite a bit of it. That he did. On stage, he tackled Hamlet and Twain. On film, he oscillated from summer popcorn flicks to experimental indies with equal gusto. Not all of it worked, but when it did, the results could be spectacular. As critic Owen Gleiberman once observed, Val Kilmer always gave the sense that he could do anything, and that he was maybe a little crazy. It is that very unpredictability that endeared him to many fans. Colleagues who once found him difficult have in later years remembered the good along with the bad. After so many years of Val battling disease and maintaining his spirit, this is tremendously sad news, Michael Mann said upon Kilmer's passing. Even Joel Schumacher, before his own death from cancer in 2020, acknowledged that Kilmer's talent was never in doubt despite their clashes. And his children recall a doting father who would do anything for a laugh or an artistic impulse, even if it meant turning the camera on himself at his most vulnerable. In the end, Val Kilmer's story is one of brilliance and turbulence intertwined. Kilmer's best performances, be it singing Light My Fire as Jim Morrison, or drawling "I'm your huckleberry" with a smirk, or trading barbs with Tom Cruise in a locker room, or deadpanning through a Shane Black one-liner, remain. Kilmer was refreshingly, sometimes frustratingly, himself. That authenticity in the long run may be as much part of his legacy as any single role he played. Val Kilmer is survived by his 2 children, Mercedes and Jack, who were by his side in his final moments. As the lights dim on his remarkable life, Hollywood says goodbye to a true maverick, an Iceman who flew high, burned hot, and refused to be anything but uncompromisingly himself. That's about all for this week's episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and why not share the video with a friend or family member. Thank you to all of our members and patrons. Until next week, sweet dreams.